Madam Chair. Thank you. Madam President and dear colleagues, the stakes in Syria today are very high. We all know why. In light of the recent developments, two paths lie before us. One is more outrages, more destruction and death, stoked by regional and international divisions, or even escalation and deeper confrontation. That is what all Syrians fear, and I share their fears. But there is another path, more serious discussion, a real de-escalation and ceasefire, and a rallying behind the only way out of the Syrian nightmare. We urgently need a consensus among major stakeholders to support concretely the UN-led negotiation process. And this is the occasion for doing it, with the goal of a package for an orderly, mapped out, credible, and irreversible agreed political transition as per 2254. Before the events of last week, we had made modest but incremental progress towards that goal. The fifth round of intra-Syrian talks in Geneva saw no breakthroughs, let's be frank, but no breakdowns either. The parties engaged, indeed engaged, on substance for 9 full days, not a small feat. The discussions were mostly businesslike, correct, and on the final day, they told me, all of them, they were ready to return to Geneva for a 6th round in May at our invitation. The government and the opposition discussed in parallel, in the format of proximity talks, all 4 baskets: governance issues, constitutional process issues, election issues, and counter-terrorism, security governance, and confidence-building measures. These discussions were framed by the goal of a political transition while preserving, obviously, we don't want mistake like we have done in the past, the sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity of Syria within the context of the Geneva Communiqué, Security Council Resolution 2118, 2254, 2268, 2336. You're all familiar with them. You've made them. And the statements of the International Syrian Support Group. Yes, the delegations prefer to focus on different issues, and yes, the gaps are still wide. But everyone in Geneva did engage on all baskets. They also discussed general principles regarding the character of a future post-transition Syrian state. These UN ideas remain living points that can be further developed as the negotiation progress on the substance of each of the baskets. One day, soon we hope, all of this discussion must come together into a package for an overall negotiation, a real negotiation. While it was premature to secure common understanding at this stage, some points became quite clear, or more clear than before, at least to me, and perhaps to the Syrians too. For example, I felt a growing appreciation that the basis of transition must be legally and constitutionally solid, and that the journey and destination well mapped out and agreed upon. I had hoped that we could have proceeded in more detail on the constitutional dimension, which has a potential, how to ensure the constitutional basis of the transition and how Syrians in transition mode might write and agree a new constitution. But nevertheless, there was a deepening of the process, and this should not be underestimated. But now, let's be frank, this fragile progress is indeed in grave danger. Already in Geneva, the talks were overshadowed by an intensification of fighting on the ground and continued lack of safe, sustained, unimpeded humanitarian access. I said formal written appeals to the Astana ceasefire guarantors, Russian Federation, Turkey, and Iran. I I did urge all with influence and leverage to restore the credibility of the ceasefire and to do more to ensure that the UN can reach, and we are ready to do so, 4.7 million people in hard-to-reach and besieged areas. Displacement also has continued. Over the last months, more than 6,000 fighters and their own families were evacuated from Al-Wahir to Idlib as part of local agreements. And we also learned of serious developments regarding the so-called four towns. Political statements issued after the Geneva talks also sent some worrying signals. The government stated its intention to reconquer the entire territory of Syria rather than emphasizing a ceasefire on and with real negotiations. Some opposition voices, on the other hand, also expressed support for military offensives, including battles led by internationally prohibited terrorist groups, or cast even doubts on the need to return to Geneva and give priority to military solutions. Then, as representatives from over 70 countries and international organizations gathered in Brussels in what was supposed to be and has been an important meeting regarding the future of Syria and address Syrian humanitarian needs and commit to a post-transition reconstruction, which is terribly needed, we witnessed the horrors inflicted by chemical weapons on Syrian innocent victims, including children, women, and men in Khan Sheikhoun. This outrage shocked the conscience of the whole human family. People all over the world also realized anew, once again, that the Syrian calamity is not just an affront to our shared values. It can affect the lives of citizens of any land, particularly if chemical weapons are used, or war crimes, or terrorism, or mass displacement. An unending war is accepted as something that we have to live with. The Syrians cannot live with it, and neither can we, wherever we are. A few days later, the United States targeted Al-Shairat air base with a strike by 59 Tomahawk missiles. Under-Secretary General Feldman briefed you on this extremely serious development last Friday. And since then, we have seen more fighting and violence, with new claims of the use of cluster ammunition in inhabited areas, barrel bombs, incendiary weapons, including in close proximity to Khan Sheikhoun itself. Secretary General has made clear his own position. He is abhorred by the chemical weapons attack in Khan Sheikhoun and calls for accountability for such crimes. In the aftermath of the US strike, he is mindful of the risk of escalation and appeals for restraint. He calls for reinstating a national-wide ceasefire. And he called for a refocus on the need for a political solution, which is also essential in the fight against terrorism. This is a time for clear thinking, strategy, imagination, cooperation. On the ground, those who do not want a negotiated political settlement, we call them the spoilers, as you know, are stopping at nothing to undermine the political process. They want us to fall in their own trap. We must not allow that to happen. We must all resolve that the time has come where the intra-Syrian talks move beyond preparatory discussions and into a real heart of the matter across all four baskets to secure a meaningful, negotiated transition package. The United Nations is ready to its part, Madam President. I have consulted the Secretary General, and I personally remain at my post and will continue to serve, especially in view of what is the current emergency. And I'm ready to reconvene talks in May, and the UN is ready to offer a real substantive starting point for discussion and negotiations among the Syrians. But let's see a few things sorted out first, if we can. US Secretary of State Tillerson is, while we are talking in Moscow for meeting with the Russian government, we welcome this direct, high-level diplomatic engagement at this crucial moment between the United States and Russia. I was in Moscow myself just before the last run, and in Washington yesterday, actually. And I did participate for the UN in a trilateral encounter with the US and Russia during the Geneva talks. These two countries, the co-chairs of the ISSG, have serious differences, we know it, but also common interests and, indeed, responsibilities. They must find a way to work together to stabilize the situation in a deliberate, realistic, and concerted way in support of the political process. And indeed, the Council, our Council, the region, and the ISSG members need to unite behind one process of mediation in Geneva. We also need the ceasefire guarantors to step up and deliver now. Important countries have assumed the responsibilities of guarantors. Those guarantees are being put to a severe test. Next week, the guarantors will meet in Tehran at a working level before a higher level meeting in Astana planned for early May. We urge them to work to renew the ceasefire and on confidence-building measures linked to the ceasefire, along with a continued effort to fight terrorism. Astana must reinforce Geneva and vice versa. That is why the UN will be in Tehran and Astana and provide whatever technical support we can to what we consider a very important step. Madam President, you have heard it so many times. We have said it so many times all together. But I will say it again. There can only be a political solution to this bloody conflict. There is no military solution, regardless of what some try or believe. That's what I hear from the Syrians from all walks of life. This is what we have been told from those who participated in the UN Civil Society Support Room and by the Women's Advisory Board. That is the voice of the Syrians. This is what you in the Council have long agreed upon. So let us view this moment of crisis, and it is a moment of crisis, as a watershed and an opportunity, perhaps, for a new level of seriousness in the search for a political solution. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. de Mistura, and we very much thank